Okay, this is week 3. We're going to talk about state courts this week. The Today we did first office hours. It had a few people stop in, and it seemed to go pretty well. I haven't had any feedback from others that had technical difficulties and couldn't get in. What you'll do is, and I'm going to go Tuesdays 10 to 11 office hours, and then occasionally when I'm sitting working on papers or I'm at my desk, I will go and do pop-up office hours. So, you should, and I'll put an email out, you should get that email, and you don't have to have a particular question about the course. Always you can stop in and say hello. I really do like meeting everybody, and this is one of the disadvantages to the distance learning. Of course, you may be saying this is one of the advantages is that I don't have to listen to you, but more than 15 minutes or so a week. But in any event, with that, pop-up office hours will happen every once in a while, Tuesdays 10 to 11. I'll put an email out that office hours are open. In there will be a link. You hit the link, it should bring up Zoom, and you should be ready to go and be able to get into the room and then talk to me. There's also a chat feature, which I use a little bit today to try to help out with some technical issues, and we'll kind of go from there. Let's see. Let's talk about state courts now. What you really needed to pick up last week is the federal level there's precise jurisdiction. The Supreme Court can only hear certain cases. When you hear somebody say that they were arrested or they got a traffic ticket, and that they are going to take it all the way to the Supreme Court to prove they're right, if they have to. Well, the problem is that is not within the jurisdiction of the United States Supreme Court. Understanding you're going to be tested heavily on jurisdictional issues, the different types of jurisdictional issues, hierarchical. You're going to talk about subject matter. You're going to be talking about the in personam jurisdiction, probably not so much with criminal laws. That's a lot more prevalent in disputes in civil law. And geographic jurisdiction. So make sure that you are really well aware of those and how those fall. Feds, federal law, federal question, constitutional issue for the appellate level and the intermediate appellate court and the Supreme Court. And then there's some original jurisdiction for the Supreme Court. Appellate court, some original jurisdiction. And then also the appeals that come from the different trial courts. The intermediate appellate court is the circuit court. We live in the Ninth Circuit, and a very controversial circuit, by the way. Comes up with some very interesting decisions, and a friend of mine, a prosecutor, refers to them as the Ninth Circus, because sometimes they just don't make, they're so contrary to stare decisis that it's amazing. And then the district court, the trial court. Now let's talk about and again, the district court, very specific subject matter jurisdiction. Now, state courts. The 10th Amendment says that everything that's not in the Constitution is left to the states. So that's what allows the states to develop their own court system, because state law can't be enforced by the federal government. There may be constitutional issues, such as the rule of lenity, whether or not statutory construction is vague, and a couple of other things that you're going to learn about in 340, in CRJU 340. So let's go to the state courts. Kind of simple. You got 3 levels of courts. Again, you have the trial courts. Unfortunately, the trial courts come in a bunch of different flavors. California has brought all of those flavors together into the Superior Court. So in California, a person gets arrested for a felony. They are arraigned in state court, in Superior Court. They were given a pretrial hearing in Superior Court. The trial itself is in Superior Court. All there. It used to be broken up into a couple different things. But take a look at that. The different things that you have. You have Justice of the Peace Courts. I have a friend who's a justice, or was a Justice of the Peace in Texas. We'll talk about him a little bit later in the semester when we talk about judges. Kind of a hoot. And then you have the municipal courts, misdemeanor courts, courts of common pleas. There's so many different names for all this stuff. I'm not going to ask you the formal name for the Intermediate Appellate Court in the state of Texas. That's not my issue here. My issue is that you understand there's a whole bunch of different names for stuff. California, the Superior Court is the trial court. The Intermediate Appellate Court in California is the district court. Thought you're gonna get me. Orange County is the 4th district. I want to say LA is the 3rd district. So LA County is the 3rd district. Now, with that, we move to some states don't have intermediate appellate courts. I mean, I'm still kind of stunned by that. You know, Vermont, Wyoming, I think North Dakota has a temporary intermediate appellate court. South Dakota, the states that have very small, caseloads, population, or maybe they were super impacted by the weather. Alaska just, fairly recently developed an intermediate appellate court. So the intermediate appellate court handles direct appeals. Everybody gets one appeal in state court. So if a person is convicted of burglary, then they can and almost always do appeal to the appellate court, even if if the lawyer looks at it and says, dude, you're in big trouble because I don't see anything here that we can appeal. They will file an appeal and ask for a review by the appellate court. Seems like a bit of a waste of time, but the idea is to ensure the rights of the accused. So, I'm going to get super tricky here. So, give me a shot at this. Let's say somebody gets a traffic ticket, speeding ticket. And they're convicted, and they want to appeal. That doesn't go to the appellate court. Each superior court has a division, which is known as the appellate division of the superior court. Misdemeanor cases would go there unless there's a constitutional issue. Traffic cases, appeals, go to this appellate division. And it's, judges from the bench will then hear the case and then make a decision on that. You see that from time to time. There was a pretty cool case in Orange County where a guy with Arizona license plates gets written a citation for tinted windows. Well, in Arizona, you can have tinted windows. In Orange County, or in California, you can't have tinted windows on the driver's level windows, driver's side, passenger side. You can't do that. And the idea is for safety of officers, the ability to conceal illegal activities inside of a vehicle. And that's the reason. Well, Arizona says you can, and the reason is because of the extreme temperatures. Keep the cab cooler is the concept. So a guy gets a ticket in Orange County for tinted windows, Arizona license plates. He goes to trial, and he says, here's the deal. I live in Arizona. I commute to California for business. If I have to stop and take the window tinting off, then that impedes interstate commerce and violates the Commerce Clause of the U.S. Constitution. Can you imagine the poor officer sitting up there going, "Arr?" Well, the officer couldn't provide the argument for why California requires no tinted windows or the proper test. Now, of course, you can tell that if it just happened to coincidentally be me, I would be licking my chops because I'd be able to make the argument that this is the test for the constitutionality should be the rational basis test, and that does the government have a rational basis for their decision on the window tinting? And the answer here would be you'd be able to work that out pretty easily. Pretty cool argument. It'd be really fun to do. But like I said, I just can't even imagine that poor guy when this happened. So the judge says, yeah, you're right. Okay, violation of Commerce Clause, because the officer can't produce he doesn't have an argument. So the defendant wins. The prosecution now appeals to the appellate division of the Superior Court because for a short period of time, that was the law in Orange County. You could tint your windows. Now the case goes to the appellate division where the district attorney's office is able to present the correct argument on the rational basis test. We're going to get really confusing here, but it's an important point. We'll talk about it later, way later in the semester, but super important. You should be asking yourself, well, what about double jeopardy? If the appellate court overturns the trial court, then they have to go back to trial and do the trial. And the answer is, you're right. There can be no retry even after this. This is what's known as a significant point of law. And the prosecution can appeal a decision, but it won't affect the defendant. So that's that appellate court shenanigans. When you have a felony, it can be appealed immediately, one appeal. And we'll also see later when we talk about counsel, the first appeal, the government needs to finance that, needs to pay for an attorney. Finally, the court of last resort. And again, all kind of different names. New York calls it the Court of Appeals. California calls it the Supreme Court. New York, just to make things more interesting, calls the trial court the Supreme Court. Very difficult thing to have going on in the background on all of these. So those are the things that I really want you to focus on for the state court stuff. I think it's really important to understand the idea between jurisdiction for state courts, jurisdiction for federal courts. And I can guarantee you, if you were to ask 10 cops, 4 maybe would understand the difference between, why a case goes to state court and why it goes to federal court, and what the jurisdictional issues are between both. Big part of this deal is understanding those differences, federal court, state court. With that, I think we've gone on far enough. We've brought another bunch of concepts that won't be coming to us for a little bit, but things that I want you to remember. Okay, with that, we'll see you guys in class. Good luck on your written assignment this week, and we will, it's going to be on, maybe beating a dead horse. I may have already said that. With 3 strikes, but I think there's some discussion that's still there about 3 strikes. Especially when you look, I'm going to post the Bureau of Justice Statistics article that was released today on crime rates and how crime rates are going up. And when you compare crime rates going up with things like AB 109, Prop 47, Prop 57, it should start to get your mind thinking about why is crime going up nationwide and in California too, or especially. Why are we seeing this rise in crime after years of lower and lower crime? So that's what we got going on. I will see you guys